Every living thing follows some kind of rules. Forests trade light for growth. Oceans recycle life through death. Even the air has invisible currents of exchange. But when it comes to magic, most fantasy worlds act like nature, just stops applying. Of course, not all of them, but it's very rare for popular fantasy media to go into detail about its ecosystem. Magic often just becomes a cheat code instead of a system. And that's strange, because if magic was real, it wouldn't really break nature's laws, but certainly add new ones. Imagine if magic had actual biology. If it flowed through veins, pooled in soil, decayed, mutated, and evolved like everything else on Earth. That's the idea I want to explore. Not what it would look like, but how it would work. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the first one to have that idea. Many fantasy worlds have mana veins as a magic source or mana-polluted forests. But in this video, I want to go beyond that and speculate how the ecosystem of a fantasy world would most likely work like and look like, by using our own as a reference. Because magic isn't actually chaos, it's mostly another form of nature we just haven't studied yet. Stay tuned, because later in the video, I'll present the perfect ecosystem, which is in fact just how the most likely magical ecosystem would look like, plus some great concepts of known fantasy media. But before we can understand a magical ecosystem, we need to understand what makes real ones work. Ecology is more than just about animals eating each other. It's about energy moving through a system. The sun gives energy to plants, plants feed animals, and when everything dies, decomposers break it all back down to feed the cycle again. Energy is never created or destroyed, it just changes a form. And at every step, a lot of that energy is lost as heat or waste, a shocking 90% of it. So if magic existed, it would follow the same rule. Magic would be a type of energy, something that moves through the world in cycles. It would have producers, consumers, and decomposers, just like any ecosystem on Earth. Later in the video, we'll go a bit more into the details of an ecosystem, but first let me have a go at basic biology. The producers in a magical ecosystem would be things that generate or store magical energy. Maybe it's certain plants that absorb energy from the sun and store it as mana, or geological formations that collect it deep underground. You can think of these like mana roots or ley-trees, the magical equivalent of coral reefs or rainforests, dense centers of life that everything else depends on. Then you'd have consumers. These are the organisms, or even people, that use that stored energy. Magical creatures might absorb ambient mana from the air, or feed on mana-rich plants. Mages, in this context, would just be one kind of consumer. Humans who learned how to metabolize magical energy more efficiently. And finally, arguably the most important part, decomposers. When living things die, their mana doesn't just vanish. Something has to recycle it. Maybe fungi break down decayed magical matter, or creatures like mana worms absorb unstable energy before it causes damage. Without these decomposers, magic would pile up like pollution until the entire ecosystem breaks down. It's the same principle that keeps our world running. Balance. Too much energy in one place creates chaos, but too little leads to collapse. So the first rule of magical ecology is simple. Energy must always move and nothing gets a free ride. Once we accept that magic would behave like energy, a bunch of very fascinating questions open up. Like, where does used magic go after it's cast? It wouldn't just vanish, it would probably degrade, like heat fading after a fire. The leftover residue might linger in the soil or air as weak, unstable energy. Over time, it could crystallize into mana stones or get absorbed back into the environment. That's why old battlefields could still hum with residual power centuries later. They're magical dead zones that haven't fully decomposed yet. But what happens when the system runs out of magic? You'd get something like an ecological collapse. Creatures and plants that depend on ambient mana would die off first. Magical species might shrink or lose their powers entirely, while hardier, non-magical life reclaims the space. It's not unlike a coral reef bleaching when it loses its algae. Life doesn't end, instead it just changes. And yes, magic could absolutely pollute. If too much power builds up in one place, the energy might mutate everything around it. You could end up with glowing forests that are alive but unstable, or lakes that shimmer with dangerous mana concentrations. The equivalent of toxic waste sites in our world, except instead of radiation, it's pure energy warping biology. Even food chains would matter. Imagine a deer that eats mana-rich grass. A predator eats that deer, gaining trace amounts of energy in its body. Over time, magical power would concentrate at the top of the food chain. This could be why dragon blood or bone are often legendary conduits for power. In short, magic wouldn't be random, but it would rather obey the same chain of dependency as life itself. Here's where most fantasy worlds fall apart. In their worlds, magic is infinite, effortless, and clean. Spells can be cast endlessly, and the world never pushes back. It's treated more like Wi-Fi, always on and always free, than as something living and limited. Take Harry Potter. Magic there isn't a resource, it's a skill. But if every wizard is constantly pulling energy out of thin air, that energy has to come from somewhere. Either they're drawing from their own bodies or the environment, in which case there'd be fatigue, depletion, and even magical weather patterns caused by heavy use. But none of that's ever addressed. Lord of the Rings does this too. The One Ring radiates unimaginable energy, yet Middle-earth seems perfectly stable. No radiation, no warped landscapes, no imbalance in nature. Power on that scale should logically reshape ecosystems. The point is, most fantasy ignores the consequences, but the best ones, shows like Avatar, The Last Airbender, or Full Metal Alchemist, hint that balance matters. They just don't take it far enough, but I personally believe that realism doesn't ruin fantasy, but deepens it. Let's look at where some stories actually get close and has some pretty good concepts. In Avatar, balance is ecological. Each element connects to natural rhythms, water to the moon, fire to the sun. When the Fire Nation disrupts that balance, it's like introducing an invasive species. Everything starts to die. But what if bending had real biological costs? Maybe overusing fire drains oxygen or heat from the environment, slowly changing the planet's climate. That's the kind of consequence a real magic ecosystem would have. Full Metal Alchemist takes another approach. Its law of equivalent exchange, nothing gained without something lost, is practically ecological law. It's energy conservation with flair. The only thing missing is the residue. When they transmute something, what happens to the leftovers? A truly complete system would include that. Chemical byproducts, waste heat, maybe even radiation from poorly done transmutations. But it's still a really good principle to include into their world building. Then there's The Witcher. The conjunction of the spheres dumped entire ecosystems, monsters, magic, species into one world. But after thousands of years, nature would adapt. Native creatures would evolve resistance to magical toxins, or parasites that feed on monsters. Evolution wouldn't stop for the supernatural. And Elden Ring gets closer than most. The entire world runs on decay, mutation, and rebirth. Gods die, rot fuels new life, and corruption spreads like disease. It's brutal, but it's strangely ecological. The only missing link is balance. What prevents the rot from consuming everything forever? Even Studio Ghibli films like Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind understand this instinctively. Magic and nature are one thing. Hurt one, you hurt the other. Their worlds feel strangely real because they remember what balance looks like and what happens when it's broken. We've talked about how magic moves through a world, but what keeps that world stable? In nature, populations don't just grow forever. They rise and fall in patterns shaped by food, space, and competition. The same thing would probably happen in a magical ecosystem. Every population, wolves, deer, or humans, has a carrying capacity, meaning the environment can only support so many before resources start running out. Which is why hunters often have to hunt deers or other animals as kind of a population control. If magic is a resource, the same limit applies. Too many magic users in one area and the ambient mana would thin out. You'd start seeing weaker spells, sickly magical creatures, and unstable environments. On the flip side, when the population drops, the mana builds up again, maybe even to dangerous levels. It's a constant tug of war between use and recovery. And just like in real ecology, feedback loops would shape everything. What I mean is that in predator-prey systems, too many predators crash their own food supply. In a magical system, too many predators of mana, powerful sorcerers, monsters, or machines that drain the environment would burn through the field that sustains them. Once the energy drops below a certain point, the system resets, often violently. This also opens up fascinating behaviors. Magical creatures could migrate seasonally to follow concentrations of mana, like birds chasing warmer climates. There might even be mana tides, slow surges and retreats of ambient energy that define the rhythms of life. Whole cultures could form around predicting these tides, farmers planting spell-infused crops when the energy peaks, or temples holding rituals during low cycles to conserve what remains. Population dynamics add depth because they create limits. Magic stops being a weird switch you turn on. Instead, it becomes weather, climate, and ecosystem all at once. It grows, flows, and recedes according to rules that life itself has already written. And sometime, all systems decay. Every burst of life, every spell, every empire eventually runs out of fuel. In a magical context, that's entropy, the gradual loss of usable energy. When people overuse magic, ecosystems crash. Forests die, mana dries up, and the world enters a magic drought. Afterward, recovery starts from the ground up. The smallest, simplest life forms return first, maybe energy-eating bacteria or glowing moss that stabilizes the field again. Then the cycle restarts. Nature always rebuilds herself, but it does take time. You could even imagine magical winters, long eras where magic becomes weak and dormant, forcing civilizations to survive without it until the world recovers. And of course, once humans enter the picture, they'd do what we always do: turn ecosystems into infrastructure. Civilizations would farm magic the way we farm crops. They'd cultivate mana-producing plants, or harvest magical minerals, maybe even breed creatures that generate energy efficiently. And just like agriculture, that would come with consequences: pollution, overuse, scarcity. Guilds or governments would need to regulate magic use the way we regulate fishing quotas or carbon emissions. Cities might glow from captured mana veins, but they'd also produce magical waste, unstable residue that needs to be processed, or it poisons the land. Conservationists might work to preserve ancient mana forests, while industrialists strip them for profit. In other words, ecology becomes politics. It's not hard to imagine protests, magical green movements, or wars fought over depleted magic veins. The parallels to our world would be impossible to miss. So let's take everything we've talked about, and the best ideas from existing fantasy worlds, and actually build the perfect magical ecosystem. It starts with our energy. Like in Avatar, the natural world itself provides the fuel. The sun, the moon, geothermal heat, maybe even cosmic radiation, all feeding the system. But instead of 4 isolated elements, this ecosystem runs on one continuous cycle: creation, consumption, decay, and renewal. Fire becomes heat that powers new growth instead of just burning, and water carries dissolved magic like nutrients through rivers and clouds. Then we borrow a concept from Full Metal Alchemist: equivalent exchange. Nothing appears from nowhere. Every spell, every transformation has a cost. When energy is released, some of it leaks away, some is absorbed, and some gets recycled by the world. It's an important rule that keeps everything fair and stops magic from breaking its own physics. From The Witcher, we take evolution. When magic enters a system, life changes to fit it. Some creatures evolve resistance, others learn to feed on it. Magic becomes part of biology itself, woven into cells, instincts, and survival strategies. That means every region on the planet ends up with unique ecosystems, shaped by the flavor of local mana. And from Elden Ring, we bring decay, because without decay, there's no renewal. Magic here ages, mutates, and decomposes. Rot isn't corruption, it's the recycling mechanism. It breaks down old, unstable magic into something fresh and usable again, ensuring that no world ever burns out completely. From Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa, we take spirit. The soul of the world is alive, conscious in its own way. When nature is hurt, the world pushes back, not out of revenge, but because balance is its only language and it needs to be restored. Now, combine all of it. Imagine a world powered by natural energy, governed by conservation, stabilized through decay, and animated by awareness. The air hums softly because magic is always in motion. Forests glow faintly at night as decomposer fungi convert dying energy into new life. Predators and prey carry traces of mana through the food web, and civilizations build themselves around ley-rich zones, managing their usage like water rights. In this perfect ecosystem, balance goes beyond a moral concept. It's a living contract. Magic fuels life, life maintains the system, and decay makes sure it never stops. That's not just a better fantasy world, it's a believable one, which I prefer in the fantasy genre, but that's just me. I would guess that many people would instead prefer unexplainable and illogical fantasy settings. It's really a question of personal taste. But the best part of this thought experiment is what it says about us. Everything that feels alive follows the same pattern: energy, cost, decay, renewal. We tend to think of magic as infinite and free, but so many stories prove that nothing truly is, which means even wonder has a price. And when you start to see magic as an ecosystem, you realize we already live in one. Energy moves, systems balance, life adapts. The only difference is we stopped calling it magic a long time ago. But I don't think we should have, because it does feel quite magical if you aren't used to it. So what do you think? Let me know if I missed anything or got something completely wrong, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I might make a follow-up video, because exploring how magic could work is really just another way of understanding how nature already does. And I left out so much detailed stuff, like how there would have to be a maximum size of magical creatures because of a size-coherent energy consumption, that I could make a dozen more videos like that. So let me know if you are interested in that, and I'll see you next week.